It's showtime. Hot technology, the world's best pilots. It's science, technology, and art, all mixed together. Pilots taking their machines right to the edge. How can they do that? It's all a matter of control. And it all started with this, a homemade kite. Before they designed their first airplane, before they thought about building their first glider, the Wright brothers built a kite. Why? Well, they had developed a theory about control, and they wanted to test it. The kite was something they could build quickly and cheaply, and it was a safe way to experiment. Because when you're testing an aeronautical theory, sometimes it's best to keep both feet on the ground. Many of the early aviators experimented using simple trial and error. But the Wright brothers, well, they did things a little differently.
The Wright brothers didn't guess. They were very much interested in knowing what was going to happen in their airplanes before they climbed into them.
They took a unique approach to problem solving. The Wright brothers had reasoned that just in the same way that you internalize riding a bicycle, pilots will internalize flying the airplane. And the only way to do this is like a bicycle, to have a machine that has to be controlled every second it's in motion. And it was that kind of thinking, again, that set them apart.
Total control. The ability to guide the plane through every axis of motion. Well, now there's a good question. What are the different ways that a plane can turn or rotate in the air? Well, an aircraft rotates on 3 axes. Here's what we mean. A plane's nose can move up or down. Now, this movement is called pitch. Looking down on a plane, you see the nose can move side to side. Now, this movement is called yaw. Now, with the plane coming toward you, it's easy to see the third type of movement. This is called roll. The Wright brothers, they designed, built, and rode bicycles. So they understood that you turned a bicycle by leaning into the turn. And the same thing with birds. They lift one wingtip, dip the other wingtip, and they bank into the turn. But how could this be applied to an aircraft? I mean, a bird's wings are flexible. How could you bend the wings of an airplane? Well, the answer was found in a cardboard box.
The story goes that Wilbur was tending counter in the bicycle shop while Orville was out back working. Customer comes into the shop, orders an inner tube. Wilbur takes the inner tube box off the shelf, takes the inner tube out of the box, hands it to the customer. Then he's sitting there and he's fidgeting with the inner tube box while he's talking to the customer. He happens to notice that if he holds his fingers just so and squeezes, the box twists. Okay? Now you and I, we see a box, but what Wilbur saw was he saw the top and the bottom wings of a biplane, and that with a simple system of cables, he could draw the corners together and change the angle of attack on the ends of the wings. Look at this. As I twist this box, one end of the wing goes up, the other end of the wing goes down. This changes the angle at which the wind flows over the wings, and the airplane will roll from side to side.
An interesting concept, but would it work? There was only one way to find out. It was time to experiment, which brings us back to this kite. Built in 1899, it was the Wright brothers' first experimental aircraft. Cords attached to the wingtips allowed the operator to twist the right and left wings in opposite directions, just like the cardboard box. It was the first example of controlled flight. The Wright system of control was called wing warping. While the Wrights apparently solved the problem of roll, they still had to deal with pitch. To understand pitch, you need to think about lift, and it starts with this. This rib is the exact size and shape of the ones designed by the Wright brothers. And these ribs, they form the shape of the wings. This shape creates an imbalance of air pressure. The result is an upward force we call lift. This upward force is centered at a specific point on the wing, and that point is called the center of pressure. Now, an airplane also has a center of gravity. When the center of pressure is in line with the center of gravity, the airplane is in perfect balance. Just one problem. The center of pressure is always moving, constantly changing position. I mean, even the slightest change in the angle of the wing can cause the center of pressure to move. And left uncontrolled, this can cause the nose of the aircraft to pitch up and down violently. How can it be controlled? Well, when the famous glider pilot Otto Lilienthal felt the center of pressure move, he tried to regain control by shifting the center of gravity. How? Well, Lilienthal would kick and twist and quickly shift his body weight in an effort to achieve balance and control.
He really was the person they were paying most attention to in terms of flight. And when he was killed in August of 1896, it was some sort of a turning point for them. It was absence of concern about control that had killed Otto Lilienthal. And so they just decided, okay, we're not going to do anything until we know how to control this thing once we do get into the air.
To control pitch, the Wright brothers came up with this. They called it their front rudder. Today we call it an elevator, and it's usually positioned on the tail of the modern aircraft. The beauty of the Wright's design is that they made the elevator controllable. By making continuous minor adjustments, the Wrights could control the pitch of the aircraft. Wing warping and the adjustable front elevator gave the Wright brothers much more control than anyone else had ever achieved. Most of the flights in the 1902 glider were almost perfect, but every once in a while the glider would slip out of control and crash into the sand. The Wrights didn't know it at the time, but they were fighting the problem of uncontrolled yaw. And remember, yaw is when the nose of the plane rotates from side to side. But when the pilot made a turn and airspeed was low, the side slip caused pressure to build up on the tail of the plane. And this pressure basically pushed the rear of the plane sideways, sending it into a spiral dive, like a corkscrew. They were having a tough time trying to solve the problem, until one sleepless night at the Kitty Hawk camp.
They went to bed, and Orville could not get to sleep. His bunk was up in the rafters above the 1902 glider. In fact, it was right above the tail. And Orville sat up there looking down at the airplane, studying how the wind must flow past the wings and the tail. And he thought, boy, if we could make the rudder, or that tail back there, into a movable control surface, we could move it to the left, balance the drag on the right side of the aircraft, have equal drag, and that airplane should remain straight and bank into a turn. Well, he got up the next morning, and he was all excited, and he told Will, he says, this is what we need to do. And Will said, you're right, let's try it. They took the double rudder off, put a single movable rudder on, and then with 3 days, they were back in the air with the first machine ever to have 3-axis control, and from then on, they were flying.
They set out to invent a control system and wings that would fly, and they achieved that in the 1902 glider.
1902. More than a year before they would fly the first powered aircraft, the Wrights had conquered the problem of control. And today, every modern aircraft uses the same 3-axis control developed by the Wright brothers. Instead of wing warping, modern planes use ailerons to bank and turn and control roll. That includes the world's most famous glider.
And you can see the ailerons and elevons now beginning to move in this flight control surface. Check out a unique view.
When the space shuttle returns to Earth, it comes back as an unpowered glider.
That's the way Commander Jim Halsell will begin to select the pitch, roll, and yaw, control of the speed brake.
The shuttle turns, banks, and lands using exactly the same principles of control first discovered by the Wright brothers. Total control. Don't leave Earth without it.